Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got Chris Bartley with me. Chris is from an organization or a company called MedShr, and we're going to talk about how social media has impacted COVID-19 and how it's been used as a way of helping to try and eradicate that by sharing information and sharing data through the world. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks very much for having me.
Before we get started, where can people find you?
So you can find me at Cam Bartley on Twitter. That's C-A-M-B Artley on Twitter. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. And the company is MedShr, which you can find through Google search.
And you're pretty active on social anyway, so.
Yeah, do you know, I really like it. I really find it valuable in terms of understanding what's happening in that space, understanding how people feel about marketing generally, and just listening into the conversations and engaging with people who are interested in similar things to the two of us, I guess.
And you like a good conversation. I had a look at your Twitter, and you do like a good debate.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the lovely things is, especially in my previous role, I worked in an agency of about 125 people, and I was pretty senior there. And I found that I didn't really get too many challenges in terms of what I was saying and the way that I was thinking. And that's never a problem on Twitter. You post something and you can get a right old kicking from some real experts very quickly. And I really think that's its value, that it can challenge the way you think, start to help you think about topics in a slightly different light. So yeah, no, I like a good chat and a good ding dong on social media.
Good. So tell us about MedShr.
So MedShr is a professional network for healthcare professionals. There's about 1.2 million doctors globally. They share cases in much the same way as you or I might share on Instagram. So the platform actually looks quite similar to Instagram. So it's typically images or videos. They might be clinical scans. They might be pictures of skin conditions. There might be videos of the doctor talking about what's happened in a certain scenario with a little description underneath them. And I think one of the beautiful things about that is doctors from all around the world are sharing elements of their clinical practice to support their colleagues in improving the outcomes of patients. So we were founded by a cardiologist here in the UK, and it's very much a platform that's been built by doctors for doctors to support them in their clinical practice.
So in effect, it's a micro social network for doctors in a way. Yeah.
Actually, exactly right. And it works just like that. And you see behaviors that are very, very similar to the behaviors you see on other social media networks. You see wonderfully put together posts and people really building their profile on the platform. And you also see the opposite of that, which is posts with no engagement and that haven't been given a lot of thought to, and people who are experimenting and playing around with the platform. So we see all of those classic behaviors, and we also see it in the same way as people interact with other social platforms. People dip in and out of it. So it might be between patients, it might be on the way to work if people are still commuting, but on the way to work, it might be when people have got 5 minutes on the sofa. That's how we see people engage and interact with it.
And how have you seen, how have you seen social media or this social media platform change over the last, well, it must be 3 months now we've been in lockdown. I can never remember.
Yeah. So in terms of MedShr, I think the behaviors are really interesting, and the way that COVID has been thought about and discussed on the platform are also fascinating. So we have a specific COVID group, whereas if you're interested in hearing cases around COVID, you join that group. That's had over 100,000 doctors who have signed up to that specific interest group. I mean, I guess not a huge surprise because everybody's interested in it. But what's so fascinating about that is that you now have doctors from Italy and the UK sharing their experiences with different types of patients. So typically it's not the classic patients they see a lot of. Typically it's the slightly unusual cases. Maybe it's someone who's pregnant with COVID, someone with a set of rare conditions, maybe with COVID, and sharing their practical experiences with other doctors in the group. Now, for doctors who may be in Africa or Brazil or other parts of the world where they're just coming to their peak, it's incredibly useful to be able to see the experiences that other doctors have had with those types of patients. Plus, there's also some real lovely practical things like, can you reuse personal protective injury? Is it possible to get secondary infection of COVID? People going through, there's one doctor who shared a video of him going through quarantine at Hong Kong airport, which I really liked because it was sort of a really interesting, just personal experience of, having to sort of sit at a desk for 6 hours and do all these things. So you can see there's a real mix of content, but some of that will undoubtedly be supporting doctors to deliver better care to patients all around the world. And that will lead to improved outcomes for patients with COVID. And, we've seen that over the last 3 months of, this new thing emerges. No one quite knows the best way to manage and treat it. There's a lot of focus around respirators right at the beginning. We all heard that on the media. And slowly but surely, doctors have started to understand through treating these patients that actually slightly different approaches, trying to delay getting people onto respirators as long as possible, using things like CPAP, that experience and knowledge and sharing that using platforms like MedShr, but other platforms as well, does transform patient care. And the faster those messages go out and the greater scale that those conversations happen at, that's that key difference. It's not a conversation in just the hospital. It's a conversation that's taking place across the globe with multiple doctors in multiple countries. And, really, really rewarding to see at a time when there's not that much good news. So it's lovely when you see these things and you can see the impact that it's starting to have for people's lives.
Because I think we've seen certain things play out on social media. There's doing discussions about respirators. And 1 minute we need those respirators. And the next minute we don't, and kind of, how did that happen? It was like, obviously, there was a discussion that if you're using a respirator, you've got to make somebody unconscious, and actually there's better ways to do that. There's also that thing going around about whether children got certain blotches on their feet. And you never know whether these things are fake news or not. But there's always there'll be Sharon on Facebook will be posting about it because she's obviously she's an expert now. But the thing is that on your platform you're able to actually have discussions across the world using that data about whether it's actually real or not.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that we manually verify all the doctors when they join. So we know that those doctors are really doctors who really belong at those hospitals. And when they post under their own name, exactly like you might on LinkedIn. So there's no kind of anonymous accounts. Everything is attributable to you as an individual doctor. And the doctors sign up to comply with their professional body's terms and conditions. So it's not to say that everyone always says exactly the right thing all the time, but everyone's intention is to add knowledge to everybody else. And we see some fantastic conversations that would never happen in the real world, where you have, say, a rheumatologist, a gastroenterologist, and a neurologist and a GP all talking about an area of care where, even though they work in the same hospital, there's thousands of people in that hospital, you'd never see those specialties mixing and engaging with each other about a specific patient. And yet on MedShr, people are interested. And in fact, I think some of the specialist doctors are more interested in other specialties because they don't know a lot about those patients. But, healthcare is so complicated. People are not just like you would see in the guidelines. Most people don't just have diabetes or just have cardiovascular disease or, just have a foot ulcer. All of these things are sitting together, and doctors are treating very complicated patients who are on multiple drugs and seeing how other specialties are treating those patients, being aware of some of the considerations of maybe if I treat diabetes in this way, it may have this knock-on impact in terms of cardiovascular management. Those kind of exchanges, just adding those little bits of knowledge are what's, I suppose, in a very informal way, just helping to improve doctors to practice better in terms of their care.
Yeah, my father has dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, and you can give him a drug for one and it impacts the other. And of course he's had, because he's certain drugs he's been taken may have taken for 10 years, and in fact the doctor then tells, well, it's pointless taking because he's got immunity to them. So it is a complex it is a complex subject, and just saying people with diabetes and COVID-19 die isn't really looking at the data.
Absolutely.
And then and the complications. You have a platform where people can discuss them.
Yeah, absolutely, and just have that practical experience, because there are obviously clinical guidelines that are set up around treating patients with Parkinson's disease, and there are clinical guidelines around treating patients with diabetes. Very rarely is there anything which says, well, if you've got a patient who has Parkinson's and also has diabetes, then actually, exactly as you said, are there potential for drug-drug interactions? Do some of the drugs for the Parkinson's actually make the diabetes worse? Do some of the drugs for diabetes, at some point, do they become pointless because they're not really adding benefit? These are not things that are written down in clinical guidelines. So those examples of having multiple cases of doctors from different specialties being able to discuss that type of scenario is really valuable. And I think many of the doctors who join MedShr join because they're based in the Middle East or they're based in Africa, and being able to see the conversations that doctors in the UK and the United States have about those types of patients is incredibly valuable to them, because they don't have access to the same level of congresses, of clinical trial data. They just don't see so much of that information in those areas. So it's really useful for them to be able to exchange with doctors in the UK or US and understand how they practice. And similarly, it's probably interesting and useful for doctors in the UK and US to see the approaches being taken in some other countries, and sometimes some of the limitations they have in terms of their options for treatments, which can be less in, especially in parts of Africa.
Well, I mean, one of the things that has come up is this anti-malaria drug, about whether it works or not, and there's been a big discussion about that. But I guess that what you have in Africa is probably access to that, and therefore you can trial that. But I mean, are you seeing people using the platform in terms of being able to? I mean, it's obviously it's not a proper trial because you've got to have a A/B test.
Yeah, we've got to be careful. I get in trouble.
Yeah. You can give certain people a drug and see whether it, you go, well, I think that could work or that couldn't work. I mean, do you see that going on and people trying stuff?
Yeah, we do. We do see people sharing their experience of taking new approaches, and I think that was particularly true of COVID. It's probably less true in more established areas of medicine. There's slightly less experimentation because the best approaches typically are quite well established. So we do see some experimentation, but I think that's not just specifically around the management of patients. That's also around what areas of the room are particularly prone to infection. How do you protect yourself as a healthcare professional from infection, and how do you best do that? And these are all things that they're all areas that are emerging right now that we're starting to understand better and better. And so I think by exchanging those experiences of what's working well in different hospitals allows a faster adoption curve of those practices in other places. I think we do have to be careful, and I think doctors particularly are fantastically good at this, at analyzing that information and those data and not reacting too quickly to one case study that looks good and waiting for there to be a body of evidence or a body of opinion around certain topics before making drastic changes. But I think we have the right audience for that on MedShr, because doctors have been trained for many years to interpret data in the right way, and also to understand that they're prone to certain biases and that they might be prone to changing things off the back of a weak data set. So we are seeing that. And I think that when you've got 1.2 million members and in a group of 100,000 people, and you've got, in some cases, hundreds of comments around a specific case with people sharing their opinions, I think that builds a consensus around the best way to move forward. So I think there's some validation in the approaches doctors present on MedShr because of the level of dialogue, the number of people seeing it, rather than it being one-off opinions. But it's fascinating to see the data emerge and to see the understanding change and to see the shifts in terms of practice that you see in the discussions over time. As you look back to 3 months ago and you look now, there's a marked difference in the way that patients are approached. And also, certainly looking at the publicly available data, I think there's a marked difference in the improvement that patients have when they get COVID now. So, that learning curve's been quite a steep one, but we're fantastically better prepared now as a group of healthcare professionals to be able to manage and deal with these patients at the kind of scale that doctors are having to treat and deal with them. So
and having the data to do that, in terms of, if you're getting people posting about things in Korea, in Brazil, in London, there's a rapid exchange of information.
Yeah, and the instant nature of social media, and the instant nature of those conversations, taking place over 24 or 48 hours. Yeah, you might have 500 people engaged in a conversation around one case in 48 hours, and the level of knowledge and expertise that's being exchanged there, where it's taking 2 or 3 seconds for one doctor to type something out and press share, collectively that's building into hours and hours of knowledge and understanding. And it goes to show how powerful groups of people are when they put their minds together. Particularly when they're fantastically educated, very smart individuals with great expertise and passion about what they're doing, and they're all sharing on those similar topics. It builds beautifully into a kind of knowledge base that then can be tapped into by lots of other doctors. So yeah, it's one of the things that I love about working at MedShr, is you see that growing and you see that group knowledge building up. COVID is unusual in that it's happened so quickly and we knew so little about it at the start, but it does demonstrate the value of communities and the value of exchanging information around the world, and the value of these types of social platforms, not just to connect people emotionally and for us to be able to share our photos and the things that's happening in the public setting, where I think things like Facebook have been invaluable for people to stay in touch with their families, but also in that professional setting of people being able to exchange information about what they're doing, which in this case is saving lives, but in many other cases is helping people. It helps me improve my marketing and the way that I approach the business. So yeah, seen that kind of in a very condensed way with COVID, which has been really interesting.
So I was going to use the community word. I mean, you're what you've got there is a community, and there's a willingness for everybody to, we're all in this together and we're all going to sort it out, and that's a very powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And so, but what about other online channels? Well, surely they can do this on Facebook or do this elsewhere. I mean, what's the difference between having something like MedShr and Facebook?
Yeah, and I suppose in theory, certainly within a private group, you could do it on Facebook. I think the one thing which is critical to doctors feeling comfortable having an open exchange is that they feel they're doing that with other professionals, and that it's not entirely open and entirely in public view. And while I could understand why perhaps there's people who might think, actually, I would love to see those conversations. I mean, and as a member of the public, it would be fascinating to see them. But I think what makes doctors feel comfortable about the fact that it's just healthcare professionals is they're open to sharing some of the mistakes they may have made, some of the things that they would do better in the future, and they are individually attributable comments. So we all know, I mean, I know from sharing some things on Twitter, not everyone agrees with the approach that you might take. You might come under, a great deal of scrutiny. These are also, while all the patient cases are totally anonymized, so there's no patient data on the platform at all. People are sharing this experience in a very visceral way. People's relatives, family members, people very close to them are dying. And so to have that conversation out completely in public, would really, I think, be challenging and difficult for doctors to be able to do. So that's where I think having a manually verified professional network in this case gives them that comfort that this is going to be an exchange which is going to add value to their practice, and they can feel comfortable sharing their successes as well as their failures. And that's what people learn from. Whereas I think in a public setting, they'd have to be extremely careful about what they said, so as not to attract criticism.
Okay.
And undermine confidence, to be honest, in healthcare professionals. Because while we all know, I mean, we intuitively know when you face something that's brand new to you and you've never done before, you don't do it as well as when you've had months and months of intensive practice and training in doing that thing. But when it comes to healthcare professionals, that's a really difficult thing to be saying. Actually, the people who got COVID really early doors probably had worse outcomes than they do now. I mean, they definitely did. But starting to talk about that is going to start making people very uncomfortable. And so that's where I think the private network element is absolutely critical, because we all know that, but I'm not sure we want to hear it.
I mean, I saw on the news this morning, the fact that, a sad story about, some guy who basically caught it early on. And, all of the mistakes, lots of mistakes were made. They didn't recognize the symptoms. They didn't deal with it fast enough, and all of those things. And it's heartbreaking to hear. But things have moved on. And I mean, even in the world, I kind of feel that we're in a different place to where we were back in March. It feels like it's years that have gone by rather than months. And those things are really, really sad. But the people that are getting it now, most people know if they start coughing. First, I was on a call with someone the other day and they started coughing, and I said, "Are you all right?" Because oh no, I'm fine. It's just hay fever or something. Are you sure? So we kind of know what the symptoms are and know how to deal with it far quicker. So you will get different outcomes.
Well, and I mean, the other thing that I saw is we have 8 doctors who all still practice, who work for MedShr, and it's seeing the conflict in them, particularly right at the very beginning of this. When they were being asked to come back into the hospitals and to treat and manage patients, that you could see the tremendous conflict of really wanting to go in and help people, because I mean that's why they became doctors, but also worrying about their elderly relatives, worrying about whether they would catch it, worrying about how they might pass it on, their concerns around personal protective equipment, all of just so many emotions going on, as well as all the same emotions that we all had as members of the public around what's this going to mean for the company, what's it going to mean for my job, what's it going to mean for for the children, what's it going to mean for all of these other things. So yeah, I do think that, I mean, I think as everyone shares that sentiment, the healthcare professionals have been unbelievable. But when you see firsthand the emotional impact that they've had to deal with, as well as the learning curve they've gone through in terms of management of patients, it is amazing what people do. It's incredible how we adapt, and it's incredible how we cope, and it's incredible the stress we put ourselves and other people under, and still manage to come through and deliver great outcomes. So yeah, that's been a fascinating human part of it, is seeing the impact on doctors firsthand.
I mean, it's been amazing to see, not just about MedShr, but seeing how the community has responded on social media. My friend Samantha Kelly in Ireland, she was one of the first people to put up a hashtag around, if you're self-isolating and you need help, then how you can do this. And I know that there's people that don't actually have access to computers, and I know that there's people that don't necessarily have access to social media, but for people that have done, it's provided an amazing community spirit. I live in London, and we started saying hello to people, and people started saying hello back, which is normally, if you said hello to people, you get punched or something. And actually, I'm carrying on doing it, and so far, people are carrying on doing it as well.
Yeah,
and it's amazing the community.
And the other thing is, I think it sort of works both ways. We've been buying shopping and things for our next door neighbours, and just kind of dropping it outside their door. And I think that it's been probably more useful for us than it has for them, because while practically it's kind of useful for them, emotionally it's been quite useful for us, simply because you do have that feeling that you're contributing something, even though it's a teeny tiny thing and it's absolutely no skin off our nose, it's no problem for us, but just to be able to contribute something back that's helped somebody is quite nice, because you do feel really helpless, don't you? And so that being able to say hi to a few people and exchange a smile and maybe deliver a bit of shopping here and there, I think it's helping to keep us all a little bit sane.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Chris, that's been fascinating about how MedShr is actually helping, and how social media is helping in may not be eradicate COVID-19, but to help increase the success of the outcomes of patients that get it. It's absolutely amazing, and things happen so fast, and it's great to see that the way that the community is being used as a way of doing that.
Absolutely. I think probably the best way of looking at it is we're helping a little bit in just making it ever so slightly less bad for some people, and that's tremendously rewarding at a time when, you know, we are in a crisis. Slowly but surely we're coming out of that, and yeah, all these little elements, these little insights, these little changes to practice just help that little bit. So no, it's been very, very interesting on a few levels. Yeah, obviously pretty terrible, but I think it does show the tremendous good that social media has, that people, when they exchange ideas and emotions and thoughts, you know, we are fantastic as a species at being able to do that, and social media is a wonderful platform to help us to do it. So yeah, it's been great.
Chris, that's been really insightful and fantastic, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us. It's an amazing thing, and as I say, as anything that we can do to make the world a little bit better, and social media is changing the world, and it's amazing, you know, not just from commerce or the fact that we're sharing, you know, where the ideas are shared in so many different ways.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure. Really appreciate being invited on, and yeah, really happy to share some of the things that we're excited about at MedShr.
So remind people where they can get hold of you again.
So you can get me at Cam Bartley on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me under Chris Bartley. And MedShr you can find by a Google search. Only doctors are able to sign up and join the platform, as I mentioned, but you will find some open pages and some community news on there. Right, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate today. Been really insightful and helpful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tim.
Have a good day. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.